So I want to talk for a second about the reality of the Equality Act, because this is very bad news. Inequality Act would be a better name. The House of Representatives has already passed the Equality Act. They passed it 224 to 206. That means, of course, for those of you who are doing the math, that 3 Republicans voted in favor of this bill. No Democrats voted against. So these Republicans that voted in favor, first of all, we are going to name and shame them. That would be Congressman John Katko of New York, Congressman Tom Reed of New York, and Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. I don't understand how anybody can call themselves Republican and vote for this bill. This bill is the antithesis of freedom and liberty and justice for all. It is not equality. It is an attack on Christians. It is an attack on women. It essentially criminalizes the practice of faith in certain ways and makes Christians in general second-class citizens. How does it do this? Let me tell you. So the Equality Act redefines the Civil Rights Act non-discrimination. Okay? So it inserts sexual orientation and gender identity into the statute. Okay, which enforces, or it allows the federal government to enforce non-discrimination laws that already exist in cases that are related to LGBT issues. Now you might think, well, there's always exemptions for religious objections. No. The Equality Act supersedes the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, and this is a quote from the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It prohibits any agency, department, or official of the United States from substantially burdening a person's exercise of religion. So the Equality Act erases that part of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So literally, I just explained it. You don't have that religious freedom protection anymore. Okay. And by the way, this is very interesting. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act used to be a bipartisan concept. It was sponsored actually by then Representative and now Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Yep. Old Chuck. He sponsored it. It passed the House and the Senate almost unanimously, and it was signed by President Bill Clinton at the time. How far the Democratic Party has fallen. Right? This used to be a bipartisan thing. So this is what would happen if we allow Congress, in this case, Senate Democrats, if we allow Democrats in Congress to redefine the Civil Rights Act and insert gender identity and sexual orientation into characteristics that are prohibited from people discriminating against them. Now, the way that I phrase that makes it sound like this is active discrimination, and it's not. So this is what would happen. If the Equality Act passes, business owners would be forced to violate their religious conscience, okay? Because the Civil Rights Act prohibits employers from, and I quote, failing or refusing to hire or discharge any individual or otherwise to discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. The Equality Act, as I said, adds sexual orientation and gender identity. So employers, regardless of the theme of their business, even if they're a religious business, they cannot choose not to hire people who are contradictory to their religious values and views. Okay? And it's actually worse than that. So it's not just that broad. It's very specific. And this is personal to me because my husband's a medical provider. So medical providers lose conscious protections if the Equality Act is passed into law, right? That means if there's a transgender surgery or an abortion, now medical providers can say that that violates my religious conscience. I object to that conscientiously. Therefore, I'm not going to take part in that. And they're allowed to do that. They're protected. But if the Equality Act passes, then medical providers lose their conscious protections. Even abortion, by the way, is categorized as pregnancy discrimination if you refuse to or decline to take part in that. Okay, can you imagine Christians in the medical field? What are they going to do? It's not just Christians. What about practicing Muslims, practicing Jews? There are a lot of religions that teach that there are 2 genders, male and female, and don't allow for gender mutilation surgery. That's against their religious beliefs, against their ethics. Abortion ends the life of an unborn child. But religious medical providers will be forced to participate in this, or they'll have to leave the medical field altogether. This will ostracize Christians from the medical field. Is that what we want in our country? Is that equality? No, that's discrimination. Okay, so going back to the hiring and firing of employees for a second. So the Equality Act prohibits sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination in the hiring of education providers as well, so teachers and stuff. Okay, so imagine for a second a Catholic school. A Catholic school hires teachers that share the religious beliefs, the doctrine of the Catholic Church. That's part of a contract usually at a Catholic school, is you have to adhere to Catholic religious doctrine. So what about an atheist or a transgender person, right? What if a transgender person comes and says, hey, I want to teach religion at your school? Well, the Catholic school is probably going to say, well, you're not living your life according to Catholic doctrine, so you're probably not the right candidate for this position. Okay, it's not about the person, it's about their actions. But under this bill, under this piece of legislation, if it were to become law, then these schools would be forced, under threat of lawsuit, anti-discrimination lawsuit, they'd be forced to allow people who violate the religious doctrine of the school to teach at the school. Similarly, employers couldn't opt out of providing health insurance that covers transgender surgeries or something else that they religiously object to. This would even apply to religious charities like the Little Sisters of the Poor, right? The Little Sisters of the Poor are the ones that have been taken to the Supreme Court multiple times because they religiously object to abortifacient contraceptive, and the Obama administration tried to force them to pay for it. Well, they'd be targeted again. They'd be forced to provide health insurance that not only covers abortifacient contraception, but covers transgender surgeries, even if they religiously object to it. Okay, so business owners too, Christian business owners like Jack Phillips of Masterpiece Cake Shop, who would sell cakes, sell anything from his bakery to any person regardless of sexual orientation, but declined to participate in a gay wedding because it violated his religious beliefs. They would be forced to participate in activities that violate their beliefs, or they could be subject to a lawsuit under this non-discrimination clause. So as you can see, the Equality Act is not about equality. No. This would target Christians. It would also target adoption agencies. Christians would be forced to violate their conscience, which punishes children. So if an adoption agency is Christian and they don't want to place either for foster care or adoption to LGBTQ couples because that violates their religious beliefs, they'd be forced to, or they'd be forced to close down. Okay, churches too, hiring staff. If the staff isn't a minister, then they could be forced to hire people that are transgender, even if that violates their religious doctrine, or else they could be sued. Okay? This is also anti-woman, the Equality Act. So it puts women at risk. Under the public accommodations provision, women's sports, biological males who identify as women would be allowed on women's sports team, in locker rooms, in bathrooms, in shelters, in sex trafficking shelters. The Equality Act is not about equality. It would hurt women, it hurts business owners, it would hurt children in the foster system and up for adoption, it hurts education system, private education system, and it hurts churches. Any Republican who would even consider voting for this bill ought to be voted out of office.
Hi. Before you go, let me talk to you about something. As you know, I've been censored on Facebook and YouTube, so I partnered with locals to create a censorship-free community. I also just launched my show, and I have a lot of exciting new things coming up that I want to make sure I can share with you and get your input on. I'm going to be sharing behind-the-scenes looks of my set and my show prep, and I get a lot of questions about my hair and makeup routines, my research process, and so much more. So I'll give you sneak peeks of all of that. I'll also be doing exclusive segments of my show just for Locals VIPs. All of my interviews will be shared on Locals for VIPs to watch as well. I'll be taking questions directly from VIPs for the video mailbag in my show, and you'll get the episodes free from ads. Who doesn't love that? Not to mention, I'll keep doing everything that you've already come to love. Ask me questions for live Q&As. Let's talk about your favorite books, what yummy vegan food I'm eating for lunch, and what ridiculous headlines I'm reading today. You can do all of that and more, but only if you are a Liz Wheeler Show VIP on Locals. The monthly subscription is $9 a month, but if you really want a good deal, we have an annual subscription for just $72. That's 4 months free. 4 months. So join me on Locals as a VIP. I'll see you over there.